have a classes workshop here, go over some of the mandatory classes, a lot of the mandatory classes, some of the prereqs, and we're going to start off with organic chemistry. So Amanda, you go ahead, take it away.
Okay, so first at the top, the reason we have two class numbers listed is I'm not sure if you guys read Dr. Boyd's email she sent maybe a couple weeks ago. Texas has changed the numbers, like the numbering system for core classes, and organic chemistry is one of them. So the number outside of the parentheses is the new number, but the number inside the parentheses is the old number, which is what you might see if you have your course map like printed out. But these are the same course, is basically what I'm trying to say. If you see either of these numbers, it's organic chemistry 1. So first, I'm just going to talk about what the class goes over. It starts with a quick recap of what you did in Gen Chem, such as like acid-base reactions, physical properties of organic compounds, and stereochemistry. Then it starts talking about, different organic compounds, functional groups, how to name these compounds. You do learn how to give a mechanism of a reaction, which basically is just you learn how to identify exactly what the electrons are doing in a chemical reaction. And lastly, you do talk about spectroscopy, and which determines like different properties of organic compounds. Spectroscopy is just a way to it's a tool you can use in a lab to identify the structure of a compound. So if you have an unknown, maybe you don't know what you're working with, that kind of ties a lot into the lab. And organic chemistry too, if you take that, but that is not required for us. Only organic chemistry 1 is required. So the next slide has some pro tips on how to be successful in this class. I would highly recommend taking the workshop. I personally didn't take it, but I had friends that did. And the reason I'm recommending taking the workshop is because the only way, not necessarily the only way, but a really good way, I think, to be successful in organic chemistry is to just do problems. Like, you can read the notes as much as you want, but at the end of the day, the tests are really ask you, there's very few conceptual questions. You really have to apply what you know, and the workshop forces you to do these problems. So I would take the workshop if you can. If you can't, there are lots of problems in the back of the textbook. Do those. The American Chemistry Society at U of H does hold exam reviews like the week of the exam. The exams are always on Friday nights. So then around Monday and Tuesday, they have these reviews where they just go through an exam with you, with people that were successful in the class. And those are very, very helpful. So when those do come around, I would go to those too. In terms of the lab, like really be prepared for the lab, because the thing is, so I'm not sure if the lab is going to change like the time, but before the pandemic, the lab was 6 hours long. You do not have to take all 6 hours, and I definitely wouldn't, because that sucks so bad. But if you read the procedure before and you understand what's going on, you will not take the whole 6 hours. Like, you'll be able to get out of there. So don't just show up not knowing what's going on. It's definitely important to do the pre-lab, understand what you're doing. You can find YouTube videos. Like, none of these experiments are really exclusive to U of H. Like, they're.
And did they have it to where y'all did the labs by yourselves before COVID? Because I know in the summer lab when I took it, we were by ourselves. We don't get a lab.
Yeah, so that's the thing too, is you're right, Jacob. For the Gen Chem lab, you got a lab partner. In organic chemistry, you do not have a lab partner. So I actually took this class in fall 2019. So I took it in person, which I believe it's going to be back in person if you are going to take it in the summer or the fall. You don't have a lab partner. So you really do have to know what you're doing before you go.
Yeah, it was summer 2019, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm. So the next class that should be in your in terms of like required classes is Circuits 1. This class, you learn about like basic circuits like resistors, voltage sources, current sources. I don't remember, like if you guys remember, or if you took 1100 and 1331 here at U of H, this course is similar in the way that everybody takes the same exact exam and it happens in one of the really big lecture halls on Saturday mornings. So like, I think ours were in Agnes Arnold Auditorium.
Yeah, Agnes Arnold.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's similar in that even if you have a different professor, like it doesn't matter what professor you have, every single circuit student takes the same exam. Another thing about this class is that in order to solve circuits, you have to do some pretty intense systems of equations. You are allowed a calculator. In fact, it's suggested that you get the TI Inspire with the CAS system. So that system allows you to not only perform like systems of equations. I'm talking about like there's 10 equations in the system. Like it's really going to be impossible for you to perform that
Just solve
in
it
a
without a
timely manner
calculator.
in the exam. So it does cost some money, but this is just a warning. If you can't get your hands on the calculator, I would find a friend that has it and is willing to give it to you for the exam, because it will not be possible for you to perform these calculations, because the exam's like an hour and a half, right? So, you need all the time you can get to actually do the work and not the calculations. Some of the stuff you learn, if you've taken physics 2, you did kind of learn Ohm's law and some stuff with circuits, but this really goes into detail with Ohm's law, like Kirchhoff voltage, the node voltage method, the mesh current method, Kelvin and Norton equivalent circuits, the law of superposition. Some of the stuff was touched on in physics 2, but it obviously like goes more in depth in this class. So some pro tips to be successful in this class. Again, I would take the workshop. I did take the workshop for this class. It's another one of those classes where you just have to do a bunch of circuits. Like there's no other way to get better, because that's what the exam is. They just give you circuits and you solve them. So I did take the workshop. I would highly recommend taking the workshop if you can. Again, if you can't, this class has, the professors have been teaching this class forever, the professors that do teach it, and they have tons and tons of old exams and old quizzes that I would definitely utilize and, do before your actual exams and quizzes.
So this one's for if we have any freshmen and sophomores here, because otherwise I think anybody else would have taken this course. This is Intro to BME, which is the first BME specific course you're going to take. Basically what it is it's a bunch of seminars, a bunch of people speaking about their research and what they do within the biomedical engineering field. Because you kind of spend like the first 2 years, 1.5 years, not really knowing what biomedical engineering is. You're just kind of like taking classes, and you just realize it's broad. And so this course kind of gives you an idea of, what it actually entails, like what people are actually doing in the field, research that's currently going on right now. You also get lab tours of the labs that are on campus. I didn't do any of these tours because I took it online during COVID. So I didn't actually get to go on any of these tours. But for in person, because we're going to be in person moving forward, I'm pretty sure, you'll be getting lab tours so you can actually see, the labs on campus and what people are doing in those labs. It's also a great opportunity for if you're looking to get into labs. If one of them piques your interest, like go for it. Email whoever's there, talk to the people that are there. If any of the subjects that they're talking about pique your interest, email those professors. For this class, attendance is mandatory, but it's pretty easy. The assignments are just write a 1-page report every week about whatever the presentation was. At the lab tours, for me, we just did a little bit of research about something that was on the subject of whatever the seminar was, and then you turn that in. So if you're just doing the work, you show up every day, it's an easy A. It's if you get tired of busy work, it's a little easy to get behind, but there's no reason. I'm not gonna lie, I almost failed this class because I just didn't do like the reports. Like, there's no reason for that. So don't be me. Just do the reports. It's really easy. Yeah.
The TAs for typically grade the BIOE 2100 reports are graduating this spring, so there's probably going to be new TAs in the fall. Just a heads up, so something to maybe keep a lookout on.
All right, so moving on to Intro to Mechanics. So this class is basically like mechanical engineering in a nutshell for people that aren't mechanical engineers. It teaches the basic phenomena of statics, dynamics, and materials. And it is very math and physics intensive. So basically think just like physics 1, but kind of elevated and taken to the next step. It can be quite kind of daunting at times, just because if you're like me and a person that's not very great at physics, it can be kind of overwhelming to try to recall back on those skills. But the book, I will say the book and Mr. Jeff Hansen, those two sources are great to pull from. So Dr. Jeff Hansen is a mechanical professor at Texas Tech University, and he posts a bunch of videos on YouTube. So he literally goes through the entire course from day one, posts a bunch of lectures, does a lot of example problems. So I highly, highly, highly suggest watching Dr. Jeff Hansen's videos on YouTube. But yeah, so basically just covers those 3 topics. And also Dr. Agrawal. I took Dr. Agrawal. I loved his class. He's a great professor. He makes that class so interesting, and he likes to bring in little like in-person what is the word? He likes to do little demonstrations. There we go. I could not think of the word. Thank you. And he also too wore a Halloween costume, which was very great and very entertaining. But yes, definitely love his class, and definitely Dr. Jeff Hansen, 100%.
So I actually really liked this class. I really enjoyed this class. This is biomedical processes. I believe in the course plan, it's like your fall of junior year that you take this. This class is kind of, I feel like for the first 2 years, it's like earlier I was saying, first 2 years of the degree, it's kind of like you're just taking a bunch of stuff. You're not really sure what biomedical engineering is. When you get to this class, you realize why you learned everything that you did, because it combines all of the different subjects that you had to take. Like you have to use the physics, the chemistry, biology, you have to use the coding. Everything that you took is going to be used in this class. That also means it's a little bit of an intensive class, but anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Dr. Shevkoplius is the only one that teaches this class, and he is a phenomenal professor. Great guy in general, honestly. But he's a great professor. He's there to help you. The class is a little hard. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around the concept sometimes. But if you don't understand, you can always ask him. He's always there to help. The majority of this class is MATLAB. So conceptually understanding things, you'll have to use all the different subjects that you've learned. To give an example, I think for one of them, we were dealing with like a system of like essentially calculating how long it would take a cell to move in a centrifuge. And so it's a lot of physics and a lot of calculus that goes into that. And so you have to understand that. But then when it comes time to do the assignments, you're going to be coding them. So the answers that you'll be submitting code. And you'll be learning how to kind of model these systems through MATLAB. pro tips for this, if you need a refresher on MATLAB, get it real quick before the class or at the beginning of the class. Because like I said earlier, this is like your assignments are all going to be MATLAB. So if you need a refresher, you don't really remember your engineering computing class, then get a MATLAB manual. There are plenty online. You can also just look on the MATLAB website or, go through your old code, search up all the functions, that kind of thing. Just refresh your memory. That way, when you get into the class, you don't have to worry about relearning MATLAB as you're trying to do these assignments. This is also a class you should not skip. Like I said, conceptually, it's a little intensive. So it's going to be a lot to kind of take in. You want to be there in class to ask questions, to see, professors. Like I said, Chef Coplius is a good professor. He's good at explaining things. You want to be there to watch him do it. I put do the super project in a question mark here because it's not technically necessary. I didn't do the super project. I definitely wish I'd done the super project. For those of you that don't know, Chef Coplius usually gives an assignment that's a little harder than the other assignments, but it's optional and it's the only extra credit for the entire class. And he gives it at the beginning of the semester and he says, if you want to do this project, you can do this project. For ours, we're using MATLAB to track red blood cells that were floating in like little wells, essentially. And so he had like a video that he sent us, and we were tracking those red blood cells. And we were supposed to make make a graph of like how they moved over time. And when you do this, there are actually people that put this on their resume because it's legitimately like things that are applicable to the industry where that's something you can say like, hey, I wrote this program that did something that's pretty difficult. And like I said, it's the only extra credit in the class and it's just good experience in general. This last point here is a little bit of a joke. If any of you know Chef Coplius, he's very adamant about two things: go get your flu shot and go vote.
All right, so quantitative physiology. I want to say this is definitely a very biology-oriented class. I know as biomedical engineers, we have a lot of physics and math-based classes. If you excel in biology, which I think has to do with a lot of memorization and conceptual ideas, you'll do well in this one. And in my honest opinion, it's a very straightforward class. I know Dr. Yasmin Akai has taught this in the past. I don't know if she's still teaching it. Predominantly, I know it's Dr. Rowe that teaches it. And my experiences with Dr. Rowe, so I'll be talking kind of that perspective. And Dr. Rowe does an amazing job with presenting you the slides, right? So she'll do the presentations every class session. And typically for her exams, she stays, everything that we talk about in class, that's what you're going to be expecting. She gives out reviews, make sure to do those reviews. So it has to do a lot with major body systems. The nervous system's the first one you go over, the cardiovascular system, the renal system, and let's see, I think they're on the slide here. Well, those are the main ones. I think you also touch on the respiratory system too. So slides, I'd say definitely study those. Something that I particularly like to do was I would go over the slides either with a friend, get your parents if they're with you, and just kind of go over the slides with somebody, and kind of helps to talk about them a little bit. And if you can, make notes on the slides too. That helps me out a lot because I don't like to do my notes from scratch. I like to be like, okay, here's the material I'm going to be tested on. Let me make some notes on the side here. I'd say definitely do that. Definitely do the reviews too. Reviews are very helpful in that class. And for me, I'd say it's pretty straightforward with the material. If you pay attention in class, you care about the subject, you'll do well in this class. I think it's very fair and very legitimate the way that it's taught and the exams are delivered. So just do your best and you'll probably do very well. Oh, one last thing. She also does hand out a cheat sheet. I'm pretty sure she's still going to be doing this, Dr. Rowe, but she allows you like a page that you can write everything you want and you bring it to the test. I think she makes you destroy it now, but anyways.
It's 1/3 the page, so you have limited space. Write out your cheat sheet wisely. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, it is 1/3 of the page. Thank you for reminding me about that. But yeah, that's going to be a very useful asset.
Okay, so I took this class spring of last year, so I had it like half in person and half virtual. What I can say, presents various equations and concept-related thermal process. So basically, I would say a physics review. Not just review, but it's like more in depth on the laws of thermodynamics. Dr. Laren, he's the one who teaches it. Usually, he's very math intensive, or he'll go and like, basically do proofs with us, kind of. But nothing like too complicated. I put Calc 3, but really pass anything Calc 2. His TA, Justin, I think he should still be his TA for a while. He's getting his PhD, so he's very helpful when he makes a problem sets and then he grades them, and usually they're based on what the exams will be over, so it's really important to do them ahead of time, and if you have any questions about them, ask Justin. The lecture itself, so he gets his notes from MIT Open Course. I don't know if any of you ever heard of that website, but it's basically MIT putting out some notes that the professors do in lecture videos. Dr. Laren, gets his notes from there, but it's still important to go to class because he will change things a little bit and also emphasize certain equations that you should work on. I wouldn't say when it comes to the equations that you should memorize them, but definitely have like an equation sheet going as you take notes and for the homework, because when you get to the test, you're going to have to recall all of these different equations and it's kind of hard. You're not allowed a cheat sheet for the test or an equation sheet, so kind of do having to memorize it. We do go over some chemistry, I remember, but not a lot. It's like mostly, I don't even remember the ice chart from like Chem 1. There was that. And that's it really that I have to say about this one. It's a good class. I liked it. Pretty easy.
All right, so moving on to numerical analysis. This was the first senior level course that I experienced. And it was it's a very simple class. It should be an easy A if MATLAB comes pretty easy to you. It focuses on how mathematics can be applied in biomedical research. And by that, it basically means using or doing a lot of what you learned in engineering math in MATLAB. So we go over a lot of mathematical problems like matrix operations, the Gaussian elimination, and singular value decomposition. And the grade is comprised of a few MATLAB assignments and a written final. And I know that's kind of confusing because it's most of the classes in MATLAB, and then the final is written, which is a bit kind of off the cuff. But he does allow you an equation sheet, if I remember correctly. I took it the semester where it was half online, half offline. Or did I take it the semester? No, yeah, I did because I took the test at home.
Yeah, I was.
So it was, yeah. So it was a bit different for sure. But best pro tip for this class is pay attention in lecture. I know like the first month or two can be a little bit discouraging because he mostly talks about his research and the biomedical research going on in his lab. But it all kind of comes together and comes full circle whenever he starts going into the MATLAB portions, because he pulls in information that he talked about in the beginning of the semester and how the different mathematical equations and the stuff that you're doing in MATLAB is used in real world applications. So overall, it's a fairly easy class, and it is Dr. Zhang. I have nothing but good words to say about him. He's a really, really sweet guy. And the TAs are also very, very approachable. So like for the MATLAB assignments, if you even have like the simplest question, They normally host like in the engineering building, like a day or two before the assignments are due. They'll rent out the computer rooms and you can all go in there, sit down at the computers and work on your MATLAB assignments, and they'll like walk around and you can ask them any question that you have. So they make themselves really available, and use the TAs is my big pro tip for numerical analysis.
Quick note on numerical analysis. Dr. Jane doesn't have a TA for the current session going on. However, I don't know if that's going to change for future sessions. So
Yeah.
hopefully it does.
Fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so genomics and proteomics is one of the senior level classes that you'll have to take. And what is this class is about? It's kind of self-explanatory. It talks about genes and proteins. So basically, some of the content you learned in Bio 1 will be revisited over the first few classes, which talks about what are genes, and talks about the central dogma, how genes are transcribed into mRNA and then into proteins. And then the class moves on with talking about some of the various technologies and methods that are used to undergo gene or genetic or proteomic analysis or research. So you're going to be talking about various sequencing methods, various mRNA or genetic or proteomic detection methods, and you're going to be talking about other technologies that are used for screening for for genes or proteins that could be associated with a certain disease, because Dr. Wu, the person who teaches the class, is doing a lot of proteomics and genomics research for diagnosing lupus nephritis. And so that's what he do. And you're going to be also learning the science background to the lab applications, like PCR. Yeah, so PCR is emphasized and focused on very well in this class, and that would kind of make you like closely or nearly a PCR expert. So now to talk about like what the class comprises of. So in the first 10 minutes of each class, one of the classmates, one of the students will give a 10-minute recap. So whatever Dr. Wu has addressed or lectured in the last class, that student will be presenting to the class in just briefly. So, and that will revolve, or that will circulate around each class member. And also the homeworks are pretty easy. So we only got to have 3 homeworks when I've taken the class in spring 2020. And that's the semester where things have went into shutdown midway. So the homeworks are pretty easy. And so I have to say that pre-COVID, the class usually gives 2 exams, a midterm and a final. So we got to do the midterm, but the final was changed into a paper that we have to write that talks about biomarkers for certain diseases. And Dr. Wu gets to assign you a certain disease that you have to do research on. So moving on to the labs are pretty fun. So they are managed by Dr. Yasmin Akai and her TAs. So in this lab, it's wet. So you get to practice various laboratory cell culture, RNA quantification protocols, and you get to do Western blot. You get to do those other techniques that are mainly done in lab, like ELISA and PCR and so on and so forth. So that's all for GMP. Next slide. So bioinstrumentation is frankly one of my favorite classes that I've taken when I was an undergrad. I did really enjoy that. So if you're really interested in electrical circuits and you really did well in the circuits class, then you're going to enjoy this class as well. And Dr. EJ, the professor for that class, he taught it very well. So if you're going to ask me who is your favorite professor in BME, I would say it's Dr. EJ. So in the first few classes, you're going to revisit whatever you learned in Circuits 1, such as the node voltage method, mesh current method, Thevenin and Norton equivalence, superposition, and those. And then you're going to move on to learning about signals and signal amplification, operational amplifiers, and signal processing, and how to create a high-pass filter, low-pass filter, and other types of filters. So that's pretty fun, in my opinion. And so to succeed in this class, please pay attention in the lectures. And so Dr. EJ does not lecture through PowerPoint slides. He writes on the board, so just like be fast with writing notes. I have to say that. And also do the homework ahead of time. And I don't think he tolerates late submissions or stuff like that. And they do, the TAs grade the homeworks with scrutiny. And so you're going to get to have the homeworks as a part of your grade, and you're going to have a midterm and a final. So the midterm, as far as I remember, was 50% of the entire grade, and the midterm was 30%. So 20% will be left on homeworks. And also up to 5% of extra credit will be given to you, and that's after the class is finished, like the entire course is finished, and that's going to be up to Dr. EJ, because he's going to be the one evaluating how much you deserve out of those 5%. And moving on to the labs. So if I have to say that if you do not know how to work with breadboards or deal with the circuit components, then please learn that ahead of time by using YouTube, especially in the summer before, because many people who are taking the lab were struggling with connecting the circuit components into the breadboard. And I would see things blowing up in the lab, and some of the amplifiers would be just like heat up and get damaged. And it gets kind of like chaotic when that happens in there. So if you know how to deal with the circuitry and the circuit components and how to connect them, then you should be good in the lab. And you also get to have a lab partner, which could be helpful. And that's all about it for bioinstrumentation.
We were by ourselves last fall.
Oh, sorry. So I was talking about pre-COVID, because I've taken this class in fall 2019. So yeah, things can be different. Nobody had lab partners last semester, because they want to implement social distancing in the lab. And that's all about it for the classes. So we're opening up Q&As. So feel free to unmute yourself or use the text box.
Yeah, so if you have any questions about the mandatory classes, or if you have a question about a class that might be specific to your division of biomedical engineering, hopefully we have a very diverse set of officers here, so hopefully we can go ahead and answer a multitude of questions. But yeah, especially any of the major ones that you have, go ahead and feel free to, shoot away.
Or if you have your own advice, we'd welcome that.
Because yes, MATLAB is used pretty heavily. Because most of the research labs, especially the neural engineering and the imaging labs here on campus in the biomedical engineering department, use MATLAB very heavily. That's how they do most of their research, with analyzing images, creating graphs, analyzing numbers that they get. So MATLAB is a very important thing if you want to move on towards the research side, and also if you want to do well in your classes. And like the whole main reason we wanted to do this workshop is also to get it done before class scheduling starts. I know that most of that has been for, or most of that starts for everyone April 12th, I think. And if that's before then, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, April 12th is the start of priority registration.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So Quinn is
Um,
asking, has anyone taken bioinformatics? I have taken bioinformatics before, and Dr. Akai, both of the Akais taught the class, and they're still teaching it every fall semester. So this class basically talks about like, it touches on machine learning and AI for a good part of the class. And it also talks about for example, the electronic medical data and how hospitals or healthcare industry operates and handles their data. So that is addressed in the first part of the class, and you get to learn about the basic numerical analysis tools or methods that are used in biomedical research, especially for those AI. And and you also get to give a presentation with a partner or without a partner. It could be your choice about topics that they're going to provide you. And so the topics could be, for me, I've done a presentation about brain monitoring, and others have talked like AI in healthcare. Others have talked about like smart homes and physician psychology or any of those other interests.
This
Like a
isn't like
MATLAB assignment, but sorry.
no, you can go ahead, Omar. Sorry.
Am I cutting off?
a little bit.
You were.
So
Sorry.
sorry, but I'm not in the best part where the connection is good. So yeah, you get to have a MATLAB assignment. MATLAB is there in bioinformatics, unfortunately. And then we have a final exam, which consists of free response questions. Does that answer your question? Do you have to learn R? No, not yet. It's just MATLAB for a small part of it. Otherwise, it's just these lectures and the presentation that you give and evaluating the presenters. And also we had a couple of guest lecturers coming in.
I was gonna say, this is not any input about the class, but I'm also taking that class next semester, so you won't be alone. And for our studio, I know that it's like used in a lot of labs. Like it's very user friendly. I would say it's like a distant cousin to MATLAB. If you're just like concerned in general about learning RStudio, it's really not that bad. I don't think you need like a class to do it, is what I'm saying.
Probably just a few YouTube videos.
There's a YouTube video that teaches you R in 2 hours. I did not watch it because I didn't want to, but I think that it could work. Like I just learned it by looking at it. I mean, like, yeah, you'll be fine. If I don't know if that's what you're concerned about, but yeah, that RStudio I think is used in a lot of like labs outside of U of H.
Did we miss any classes that y'all would have liked to talk about? Maybe y'all like capstone more.
I don't know if y'all went over it, but I might have missed it. Did y'all go over biochemistry? I just have to take that next semester, and I have any tips, I guess. I was wondering.
Yeah. I personally didn't do well in biochemistry. If someone else wants to take over.
We can talk about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will say I'm similar to what Martin implied. I'm someone that's very much more biology, chemistry oriented than math and physics. Biochemistry, it really does depend on who you have in terms of what you do and don't need to memorize. So I'm not going to say there's a lot of memorization because it really just depends on your professor. I would say that you should go to class. We're never going to encourage anybody to skip class, but again, like this is one of those classes you really just need someone to tell you how it is. Obviously, biochemistry is one of those subjects that just hasn't changed much in, the past decade or even further. So you can find lots of resources online. Biochemistry is a professor-specific class. It's not like Circuits 1 or the intro engineering classes where everybody takes the same exam. It's very different depending on who you have. I had I don't even know his name. Well, I had this guy, and then he was like sick for the first half of the semester, and then we went online, and suddenly he was my professor, and the other guy wasn't. What I'm trying to say is, I had to memorize all the amino acids, their structures, their 3-letter codes, their 1-letter codes, whether or not they were nonpolar, polar, charged, like. But there was another professor that she gave them a chart like during the exam. So like it just depends. I would definitely use Rate My Professor if you're someone that doesn't want to memorize them, or if you don't care. But yeah, I would say go to the lecture. It's like a pretty straightforward class, you know. That is a class that's more conceptual. I think you don't have to do as many practice problems, in my opinion. But yeah.
All right, sweet. Thank you. I'll definitely look at the professors beforehand then.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I'm sorry I don't remember my professors' names. I feel so bad.
No. It's all good. Thank you.
I took it so I took it half in person and half online. I did pretty well considering yeah. I still got an A. It was okay.
One
Yeah.
quick note I do want to mention is that even though it kind of becomes irrelevant later on because only one professor will teach one class, but Rate My Professor for some of the earlier classes is a good guiding source, I'd like to say. It's not an absolute. Some people will have negative experiences and put a, trashy review or whatever. But it is a good guide for determining, which professors most people are like, yeah, this is a pretty good one. Because I've had a few that like I used Rate My Professor before. And when I got to my professor, they were pretty like great, So yeah, again, later down the line, you'll only have one professor, one class. But for especially some of the earlier ones, it's a good guiding source. So since it is 8:00, I do want to go ahead and dismiss the ones who maybe you don't have a question. Because I wanted to say we are at the end of the journal meeting. But if you do still have any questions, like class-specific ones, we'll still be here to answer them. You're welcome.
Thank you, Matt.
So yeah, y'all take care, okay?